you're absolutely right. And we talk about that, when I get asked about like, oh, where's this guy going to be drafted? Where's he going to be projected? And it's like, oh, we like him in this spot. But all it takes is one team, right? One team to see you at a certain event where they see you shine in an area that they value, right? And because it is like across the board, 32 NHL teams, their lists are wildly different, right? Maybe at the top, it's going to be very similar, but like throughout the way, like it's crazy because they all value different things. They all see these players at different times. And so you never know who's watching, but you exactly right, is that you find, what can I bring to the table?
That was Cam Robinson from eliteprospects.com, and you are listening to episode 139 of the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podollan. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podollan, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podollan, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hey there, welcome back or welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast. This is episode 139. And today you are going to be listening to a conversation I had with Cam Robinson. Cam Robinson is a member of Elite Prospects. That's eliteprospects.com, or EP, as sometimes is known in the industry, which is essentially your database for anything hockey related when it comes to stats and or tournaments and or rosters. It's similar to, one of their competitors, which, whatever I can say here, of course, is Hockey DB. Now, the difference between Hockey DB and Elite Prospects, or at least one of the main differences I see, is that there are no youth athletes or amateur athletes on Hockey DB. So once you become a pro, Hockey DB will cover you. Elite Prospects starts at the grassroots level, which I think is super, super cool. So they'll start, representing players as soon as they get to a league that they cover. So there are a lot of 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, even down to younger ages. I believe that they start as young as the Brick tournament every year. We'll cover your stats, where you played, who's on the roster, what your goals were, assists were, penalty minutes, so on and so forth. And it's exciting. One is exciting for the players to see themselves on the internet, that their stats are tracked, and it's also fun for parents to see. And it's a great resource and a great tool for recruiters out there, whether you're an evaluator for a junior team or some type of a spring program or college scouts. You can pull this up and you can see in a snapshot what this person has done and where they've gone. Which is a lot of fun. And Cam is a key piece of this. Cam Robinson, my guest today, he is director of content for EP, and he's also director of film scouting. So he does a big part of watching the amateur draft each year, the participants or the players that are eligible for the amateur draft, and he's a key piece of the absolute encyclopedia of media that they put together for their draft, their draft document that the Elite Prospects produces every year. Cam was at the draft this year on the floor, covering the draft. He gets to do his own picks for EP, and is out there watching everybody. And so it's fun. So this conversation was a lot of fun. Anytime I have a chance to talk to evaluators, to scouts, how they watch the game, what's their approach when they sit down, how often they see a player, what they look for, what stands out. This should be like music to your ears if you are a young athlete out there, or a parent, or not even just a young athlete, like any hockey player out there. How are you graded? How are you evaluated? How can you do your best to stand out from a mix of 40 players on the ice on any given night? And that's what a lot of this conversation centered around. We do talk about Elite Prospects, as Elite Prospects is one of my partners with UMH 68, and along with Up My Hockey, we have joined forces as they're going to be part of the sponsorship element there. And any player that plays for a UMH 68 tournament gets their stats on Elite Prospects. So if they weren't already covered, they will be. Their new profile would be created. Most players are already on there, and their tournament stats will be included on Elite Prospects, which is a really cool thing, not only for UMH 68 to be recognized, as there are a lot of tournaments out there, as I'm sure most of you know, from east to west, all across North America. And Elite Prospects doesn't just pick anyone to partner with; they only choose to participate with the best. And and the ones that they feel have the most credibility. So that's a really great honor for UMH 68 and anyone who plays in it for me. And it's also great to align with such a company that is really, in my mind, giving back to the game. It's really cool the way they're going to the grassroots of it. They're developing players, they're celebrating players, they're giving players an opportunity to showcase themselves, to be able to share more about themselves, whether through their heights and weights and their traditional stats, or also media reels and highlight reels that can be on their profiles, and really allows them to get exposure to a wider audience. So really fun having this conversation with Cam. His story in and of itself is really cool. How he got started, what he's doing now, how he serves the hockey community and Elite Prospects, and again, how players are evaluated and what that process looks like. So if you are a player that wants to be noticed, this is an episode for you. So let's get into it. My interview with Cam Robinson. All right, here we are for episode 139. We have Cam Robinson on the program, the director of content and director of film for Elite Prospects. Welcome to the show, Cam.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jason. Looking forward to chatting.
No worries. I like that you got you're branded up. You got the EP shoulder patch there. Hey,
Yeah.
why 16? Is that near and dear to you?
Yeah, it's actually my number growing up. I was a huge Trevor Linden fan when I was a kid, being a BC boy, and so I gravitated to 16 when I was a kid playing. And yeah, Elite Prospects, they just sent me, this is for our EP Invitational that we run every year, and so the kids get these sweet jerseys. And so I was like, guys, send me some of these jerseys. So they sent me 4 of them, one each color, and one just happened to be 16. And so I was pretty stoked on that.
You're like, that one's going on
Yeah,
right
that's the
now. I
one.
love it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, maybe I'll ask you about that, but maybe we'll start first just with being a BC boy, watching the Canucks growing up. I'm a BC boy myself. I was born in Vernon, and so they were the first team that captured my heart. I think I'm a little bit older than you. I watched King Richard kind of take him to the final there as a 5-year-old, right, in '81. So that was Tiger Williams and all those guys. That was when I fell in love with the game, and my parents knew, for me personally, that there was something with this kid, because for a 5-year-old to sit right in the middle of the living room and watch every second of every game, they realized that I must have some affinity for this game. What years were you? Did your heart get captured?
Yeah, so I mean, you were that 82 cup run. I was the 94 cup run that really, my dad was always watching hockey when I was a kid, and my grandpa and stuff, but it was just kind of in the background for me. And then I got swept up in that 94 run, and I was a little late to it. So I was 7, I guess, maybe just turned 7. And yeah, I remember, like, I was, after Bure scored the OT winner in round 1, I think I spent the next 4 or 5 years out in my cul-de-sac doing it on rollerblades. And game 7 of the cup final, I was too nervous to watch. I'm outside shooting a ball against the garage door. My dad's coming out. You got to come inside. I was like, it's too stressful. But yeah, so that was the flying skate jersey, and that was kind of the start of it all for me. And,
Right.
it's just turned into a lifelong obsession and a career. And yeah, it's funny how that happens.
There you go. Yeah, one of my ex teammates, speaking of Game 7, there was the guy who hit the crossbar.
Nathan
Yeah,
Lafayette.
Nathan
Oh my
Lafayette, and you know what? Who
goodness.
actually lives in Vancouver now? He's there doing insurance work. Unbelievable
Oh,
human being, great guy, great family, great wife, and yeah, I mean, for his time there in the NHL, I played with him in the AHL, but yeah, he was part of that run and had that shot. And anyways, I mean, it's funny because in Canucks lore, it's kind of looked upon as this like negative thing, but like, geez, everything about it, he did great. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was supposed to score that. You know what I mean?
right? Yeah.
It was just that close. Like,
Oh man.
what a
I
difference maker. What a
Yeah, I heard a
series
funny
too.
story about Lafayette too, that when he was in St. Louis, is that Brett Hall was legendary for never coming off the ice. And so, his whole line had changed, and he's still out there, and the line had changed again, and he's still out there, and they're yelling at him to come to the bench. And he finally starts getting to the bench, and it's Lafayette about to come over. And he goes, "Not for this guy." And he turns back around and stays on the ice. I guess Lafayette was just a young kid. He's like, "Oh man," sits back down.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I actually boy, I would love to Brett Hall would be so fun to talk to. Like Kelly
Oh yeah.
Chase, I just saw a clip today. He was on Missing Curfew and told a story. I don't know if you saw it or not, but he got
No, no.
traded apparently at the deadline. One of the years he was in St. Louis, he was actually golfing with Brett Hall at the time. He got traded at the deadline to Montreal. And Holly was on the golf course. She's like, "You didn't get traded, like you're not going anywhere. Stay out here with me." And so he like Chaser leaves, and who I played with in Toronto, by the way. Chaser's a great guy too. And
Mm.
but anyways, I guess yeah. So Chase leaves to go get informed that he's going to Montreal. Like this trade's been done, and Hull, I guess, called when he was on his way and told the GM, he's like, if he's going, I'm going with him. And anyways, and the whole trade got canceled because Hull
Oh
made the
my
call to
God.
the GM. They reversed it. And anyways, like Kelly told a hilarious story. So I mean,
Oh
there's so
man.
many Brett Hall stories. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. What a legend. That's
Yeah,
hilarious. He goes, I go, well, they're roomies, right? I guess they're
yeah,
best buds. I love that. That's
yeah.
great. Yeah.
Anyways, well, so did you play it all growing up, or were you just a fan?
Yeah, I played, I AAA growing up, and I remember I was highest I went was like 16, trying out for a local junior A team, and the Clippers there, and I was one
Okay.
of the later cuts, and they wanted me to move to Port Alberni to play junior B for their affiliate, and I was like, I'm not moving to Port Alberni at 16, and so I went back and played AAA for another year, and I ended up, quitting early just because I was young and wanted to hang out with my buddies and chase girls, and of course, didn't live to regret that for the rest of my life. But I was never good enough to go pro, anyways. But I probably could have milked a couple more seasons out, anyways.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so now you're sitting in this EP chair. Like, how did hockey become a part of something that you knew you wanted to, keep a part of your life?
Yeah, it's kind of as these things go. It's a weird tale. Is that I was finishing university to be a school teacher, and my wife had just given birth to our first my son, who is now a massive hockey fanatic. He's got his rep tryouts this afternoon,
Cool.
but so we just had a newborn and like a preemie. He came 2 months early, and I just decided to write an article. So I wrote an article about Tarasenko. Um, and Jaden Schwartz. And I just used some like advanced stats and just some interesting. And I sent it into this website, Dauber Hockey, the site that I like to go and read. And I was like, I don't know if you guys are interested, but I wrote this. And they're like, this is great. Do you want to work for us? And so by work, it was, volunteer basically, like the
Yeah.
pay was, maybe buy yourself a cup of coffee every week on what they were paying me.
Right.
And so, I negotiated with my wife that, when I'm done schoolwork and baby's in bed, I'll write these articles. And so I did that, and I hustled, and I kind of EP noticed, and they offered me a gig, and then they made me exclusive. And then this will be my second year. I was able to walk away from teaching after 10 years and do this full time. And so now I work from home, and I watch hockey, and I talk about hockey, and I coach hockey, and it's like my entire world revolves around it, and I couldn't be happier.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that grind piece too, because so many people aren't willing to do that, So congrats on you for that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was there was definitely some grinding for sure. I'd be sitting there instead of marking or prepping, I'd be writing an article and then trying to mark some math homework and right. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
but it paid off in the end. So
Yeah. Well,
mm.
Kevin Peterson, he was like my very first guest, episode 1, and he's now a pro scout for, well, not
Utah,
pro, he's an
right?
amateur scout for Phoenix or Utah.
Utah. Yeah, I know Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, so, yeah, so you know him.
yeah,
So he, like, to get into coaching because he never really played, right? And you know how it is, it's like it's a bit of an inner circle there, right? With the old boys club of, like, where you played and, your connections, and if you haven't played, it's kind of a harder room to get into, and he just kept showing up at the arena. Like, that's what he said. I mean, to get into coaching, he just kept being there and kept
yeah,
volunteering to help and kept, going on the ice if somebody asked him to, and that turned into an assistant coach job, which turned into this, which turned into that, right? And it's just, you gotta be around, right? You gotta
yeah,
be around, and you gotta be visible, and you gotta wanna, provide value maybe when no one sees that you have, value to give back, or I shouldn't say that. They're not prepared to pay you yet, maybe at this point,
yeah,
but you're prepared to give value. So,
yeah.
yeah, that's an awesome strategy. I love that that got brought up.
Yeah.
What, with Elite Prospects, and we talked a little bit of this offline before we started. I mean, I'm excited to be involved with Elite Prospects. They're obviously a big name in hockey. My tournament, the UMH 68, is something that they wanted to partner with me on, and part of that was us having a conversation about Elite Prospects. So I'm really cool. Like, I love what they're about. I love what you guys are doing. Give me, maybe we'll start with that EP Invitational. What is that event, and where is it hosted, and what's it all about?
Yeah, so with the invitational, it runs every year, and it's something that we're really proud of. It started out as just a 2-team thing, and it found some success, and we moved it up to being 4. We do it every April, I believe, and it's at Michigan State's arena there, Mun Arena. It's got 68 players. They come, they show their stuff. We got scouts in the stands. We got, high level, you pull all these high level players from AAA prep schools, all these different places that are looking for, exposure. They're looking, can I find myself a Div 1 scholarship? Can I move on to the CHL? Like, can I look to, end up being drafted? And, so we've had some players end up being at the invitational and then working their way into NCAA or CHL and then getting drafted. So it's only done it for a few years, but the success stories are starting to build up and we're starting to bring in more and more talent. So it's a really cool thing. They get the exposure, they get, kind of the sweet jerseys, and they get the whole elite prospects environment, and they get to meet some of our big wigs. And it's just a really cool event for some of these players that we, at EP, we've kind of started to try to mold ourselves into what we're calling like the gateway to hockey, so kind of like your LinkedIn profile for hockey though. And so, because not everybody is just going to walk into the CHL and then a first round draft pick and then sign their ELC, is that like for a lot of guys, it's, grind it out through some junior hockey, maybe getting the ECHL, and then you're moving overseas and you're trying to find a new home. Or for kids that are, coming out of their high school and they're like, I'm not good enough to play D1, but maybe I can go play D3 somewhere and build my way up that way. And so, we're kind of a matchmaker in that regard. And so we offer players the opportunity to, take control of their profile a little bit and add basically like a resume to sell to recruiters and to coaches and to scouts. And we know it. Like, I have many contacts in all sorts of different leagues, and they rely on elite prospects. The first thing they do is they go, let's go check them out on EP and, they know they can trust the height and the weight and all the stats are going to be legitimate, and they can contact people on there and they can see the videos and see some of their highlights and stuff like that too. So yeah, for the invitational and our EP Cup series, it's just more eyes on some of these players. And, when I was young and playing, I remember going to like a WHL showcase at 8 rinks there in the Lower Mainland. And there's, the Sutters are up there watching when they were in the West, and all these NCAA clubs got their scouts there, and you're like, man, like, time to show out. Right. And so, so it's just an opportunity for these kids to get on a bigger stage and kind of show what they got.
Cool. And so you're identifying players for the of NHL draftable age, or what birth year are you looking at every year?
For the invitational?
Yeah.
So those guys are going to be younger players. Yeah. And so we do, I believe it's like, I might be confusing it with the Cup series, but we have like different levels. So they'll have like a U15, a U16, a U17. So and a lot of it will be for like the USHL. So we'll have, players that aren't quite, like, they're coming out of high school, they're coming out of prep school, and they're looking for a spot on a USHL team. And, whether they might be draft eligible still, but they're not at that level to be drafted, but maybe they can get in and play their 18, 19-year-old season in the USHL and then work their way into getting themselves maybe a partial scholarship or something to the NCAA. Cool. So yeah. So that's mostly exciting. Like that kind of elite youth AAA levels that are trying to take the next step.
Yeah. Fun. That's exciting. So when it comes to, elite prospects, it definitely is. It's a database, right? You're on there, you see the tournaments that they've been to, you see who they played with, anyone, any teams they've played for, all the stats that are aligned with that. So it's, I use it all the time as well, just to research players and to see where they're at. Is this, how do you find like that ecosystem working? Is it like player intensive, parent intensive? Obviously there's more players and parents than coaches. So, I would assume that the majority of players are either that or fans, I guess, that are using the site, or do you know who the unique visitors are?
Yeah. Like, fans make up a massive swath of it, but like, yes, players it's huge, and parents that fall in line with that, especially when they're younger players. And usually like those are the people that are really invested and dedicated in either their own success or their son or daughter's success. Right. So, hockey parents, they spare no expense to help their child. And, I've got my kid trying for rep here, and we're doing everything we can to help them out. So it's really neat in that regard. And especially because now, like when I was growing up, like, EP's been around for 25 years. You didn't get an elite prospect profile page when you played U13 or, when you were playing junior B. Like that didn't land you a page. And now, like, these kids, like, there's 9 years old and they're coming off the brick tournament there in Edmonton, which I got to go to this year, which was a good time. And they've got their own EP pages, right? Like I just today, I had an NHL scout text me. He's like, not our usual conversation here, but this is my son's EP page. I'm just wondering how come these stats aren't on there, like, so you get it from everybody, right? Parents. I get like on a TikTok video, I'll have some kid being like, "Hey, my stats from November 4th aren't right. Can you change those?" I'm like, "Buddy, this is a TikTok video. Like, go hit us up on the right avenue here, and we'll get you sorted." But yeah, everybody is pretty well invested on making sure everything's up to date. And these kids are growing quickly, so they're like, "Hey, here's my advance. I put on 10 pounds. Like, we got to get this updated." And it's
Yeah.
important to them too, right? Especially
Yeah.
as they're trying to move up the hockey ladder. And then even for people that kind of wash out at whatever level, if it's D3 or if it's CHL or whatever, and then they're like, "I want to stay in the game. How can I do that?" Right? Like, how can I transition into coaching? How can I transition into scouting or something like that? And we also, provide that kind of information to them too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's fun. How old's your son, or what birth year is he?
He's a 2015. Yeah. So he just
Okay.
turned 9 there just a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So this is his first year he's able to try out. This is the U11, the rep
Right,
program here on
U11
the
rep.
island. Yeah. Yeah. And so
Oh,
he's
that's fun.
he's out there working. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Uh, what you're involved with the director of film scouting, film scouting. Talk to me about that aspect or that arm of EP, because I did take a look at the 2024 NHL draft guide, and it was extensive, to say the least, super robust. What is your role in that draft guide, and how does that work in the EP model?
Yeah. So my role since I moved into full time with Elite Prospects is I wear like a ton of hats. And so, director of content, it's a pretty broad term. And so, I'm responsible for all sorts of video creation, social media, editorial. I'm in every marketing meeting and all this stuff too. So which has inevitably it will impact how much I can watch every year when I was just scouting. So I can't speak highly enough about the team that we have at ringside there. Our scouting team led by JD Burke, Mitch Brown, David St. Louis. Like, we have an incredible group of maybe like 8 or 10 of us. We've got a guy in Finland, we got a guy in Sweden, we got a guy
I
in
saw that.
Czechia. Yeah, so we cover the globe. No one in Russia, but we have a sicko in the States there, Dylan Griffin, that he watches so much MHL tape. I don't think it's healthy. And so, yeah, with that for me, I do primarily video scouting. We submit game reports and player reports on every game we watch. And then I'll go to these events. So, I was at the Holinka last month. I was at the U18s in Finland back in April, May, and I'll be at the World Juniors every year. And then USHL Fall Classic, and we do so we have someone at like every tournament. We have locals hitting up most of the CHL rinks. We got Americans going to the USHL rinks. So if there's a player out there, we've had eyes on them live, almost assuredly, unless they're playing in Russia or Belarus maybe. And then we get just hundreds of reports on them through film as well. And so
Right.
we spoke off air there about our draft guide, and that's our flagship product editorially. And I have director of amateur scoutings. I've had AGMs and GMs tell me that like they get that product and they put it up in their war room right beside their scouting reports too. And it's we've graduated several people to NHL gigs. We've had multiple other ones, myself included, have offers that we've turned down just because the situation at Elite Prospects it's tremendous. It allows us freedom and an opportunity to remain kind of forward facing and public facing. And for me personally, like, I like to be out there and kind of share my opinion and get into discourse and have some fun with it too. Where if I moved to the team side, I would kind of all of a sudden I'd be a ghost, right? And I've had loads of friends move into that world, and as the texts become fewer and fewer because they're afraid to share too much. So yeah, no, it's a great company. It's a great product. The draft guide, like, it's so extensive. I think our full copy with all the game reports is something like 2,000 pages on a PDF. And so this year we put in an amended light version. So all the information minus the game reports and the player reports. So if you don't care about what the kid did when he was 16, you can just get our synopsis on him and our tool breakdown and all that.
Right. Is that now thinking about the things you offer, and obviously I have 3 boys coming up too. I know as a player, back when I was playing 30 years ago, there was no access to kind of what people were saying about you necessarily until like the NHL Central Scouting came out with whatever their snippet was. That was like the first time you could really see anything. And I know things have changed dramatically since then, but would I or would my son, let's say, who's coming up to his draft year, if he had a verified account or whatever account that would require that, could he see the reports that you guys are writing about him and potentially, either use them to his advantage or otherwise?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so up until this point, he wouldn't see them until we release the guide, right? 3 weeks before the draft or whenever we drop it. But we are just integrating them now where as we like upload them, they will then be uploaded onto that player's profile page.
Mm.
So if you're a premium member, then you would have access to that. And so if it's your own page, right, and then you would actually get to see it basically in like real time. So you could finish up a game, maybe you pop 2-1 or something like that, and you can go into the dressing room. And by the time I finish writing up my report, you can pull up your EP page and see what I had to say. And then you can come up there and give me shit in press row or something like that if you didn't like.
Hey, that's pretty
Yeah.
cool though.
So
I think
yeah.
that's great, and for the right player, that could be really valuable. I mean, for the wrong player, it could have maybe adverse effects too, potentially, right? But that's the mindset side that I deal with all the time. But for some guys, it's like they want the information, they want to know. That can be motivating, right? Or it can be confirmatory, or whatever the case may be, right? To have that access, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we
Um,
try to be sorry, we
uh,
try to be like we're talking about teenagers here too, right? Like oftentimes we're writing reports on 16, 17, 8-year-old kids that eventually they're going to see. And so, we give our opinions and we share that, but like in a professional and in a courteous way. That so, whereas the internet nowadays, like you said, it's not like it was 30 years ago. It's like you can be out there and you have a bad game and Twitter's on fire, just like lighting you up and
yeah,
coming after your family members, whatever like that. So it's
right.
we keep it PG in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Take a short break from the episode to remind you that if you are a hockey player and you are looking to get noticed, you are wanting to be scouted, to be evaluated, to be recognized for a future opportunity, then you should be also working on your mindset. Half of what we are talking about here with Mr. Robinson is the idea that we need to provide value to a team. In order to do that, you have to understand what you are. You have to excel at something. You have to be great at something and confident in something. And you also can't have any glaring weaknesses as well. Oftentimes, our mindset is not supporting that goal and that dream of being evaluated and playing somewhere in the future. Oftentimes, we are unclear on what we are great at. We are unclear on how we provide value. We're also clear on how to be confident enough on the ice to exhibit and showcase that value, which is why people like me exist to help you figure that out. So, if you are someone that wants to work on their mindset, wants to take the mental fitness, the skill of mental fitness to a new level, to understand some tools to put in your toolbox that can help you grow to be the best player you can be, I have programs running consistently around the Peak Potential Hockey Project, which is my mindset program that I designed, that is online, that is 4 weeks long, that can be taken in one of three ways. One, by yourself, it's called the solo mission. Two is the guided mission, that is with a like minded peer group from all over North America that will be taking the program at the same time as you are. And we will get on coaching calls together. That happens to be the most popular way to take the program. And there's also the mentored mission, which is one-on-one with me, where we dive in specifically to you, your toolkit, your tools, and how do we maximize on what we have there, and how do we grow and develop faster than others. So, mindset is the new competitive advantage. It is the next thing. It is something that you should be looking at, diving into, and practicing if you want to be your best player. And if you want to do that, you're in the right spot. Upmyhockey.com is where you can find out any of the things that I just chatted about. If you are listening to this episode essentially live when it first drops, we have a guided mission, lucky you, starting in 1 week, dropping on September 30th, 2024. You can check my website for any upcoming launches of guided missions. But yes, we are 7 days away from a launch. There is a mindset quiz in the top right corner of my website that allows you to take a 5-minute quiz to get a letter grade on where you are standing at right now, and potentially to talk about those results with me and see if you are the right person to get involved in my mindset program. So, with that being said, let's get back to the conversation with Cam Robinson. Since you touched on that and you're writing reports, and you mentioned 2-1, and one of the things that I deal with athletes, hockey players all the time, is the stat line and how important that is, and I mean, there's there's so many things to unpack with this in and of itself because we're talking about EP and what do you see, right? You see a snapshot of numbers on a line that is supposed to be an example of your season, right? So like there is an immense amount of importance to the numbers, but the game is much more than the numbers. And I think when you're watching the game, I assume that that's also some of these things that you're looking for. And when I'm talking with athletes, I'm like, you got to focus on the A, B's, and C's of what gets you the goals and the assists, right? And that is generally what's going to do you favors to have that stat line look better at the end of the day. But maybe I'll digress just to that fact. Like, you do recognize 2 goals and assists. You mentioned it already in your thing. However, how do you break down an athlete's performance during a game? What are the things you're looking for?
I mean, to be honest with you, like I'd say like half the time in a report, I'm not even mentioning the production, right? Unless it was something like, oh, and the end of the day, he had 4 primary helpers, right? But I've already probably talked about what he did to be successful to set up those plays. And so, yes, at the end of the day, numbers will matter, right? Especially if you're like a high end player and you being compared against other high end players, it's like, yes, this guy's got all these tools. He's so speedy, he's so smart, but why doesn't he produce? Right. Like that would be a question mark. And you'd be like, that would kind of put, yeah. But for the most part, it's like, I can watch a player and he can get no points and I could be far more impressed than the guy who did pop 2+1. So first thing for me, it's skating. Skating is everything at this point in the game. If you can't skate, you can't keep up. But I mean, as important as that is, there are ways to be successful even without that pillar. And eventually you're going to have to get it to a certain level, but then it's intelligence, right? So are you able to look 2-3 steps ahead? Are you assessing before you go retrieve that dump in, right? Do you know which winger wall is going to be clogged up and can you break that coverage when you're under duress? And so being able to think quicker than the game, the level that you're at is going to afford you all sorts of opportunities, right? It's going to set you up for some space to make a play yourself, to move it with your feet, to move it with a pass. So skating and IQ are massive. Obviously, puck skills are great. They're fun to watch. They help you produce a big shot, all those things. But like for me, that's like secondary on the hierarchy of what we're looking for. And my evaluations they've evolved, and I hope they continue to evolve. Right, like I feel like I'm a far better talent evaluator now than I was 5 years ago, and a big part of that is asking questions, listening. So I'm fortunate enough to have a whole bunch of professionals who've been doing this for 25, 30 years that have high ranking positions to bounce things off of, to pick their brain. And so that's what NHL scouts are looking for too. They're looking for people who, and right on that top hierarchy is, effort, right? Do you look to the heavens or slump your head when something goes wrong, right? Or do you get back on the back check? Are you coachable? Are you able to, can you see progression throughout the year where it's like, this is a deficiency in a player? And oh, look, by Christmas, it's starting to get cleaned up. Oh, by April, it's now become a strength. And we want to see that. Even if there's still warts in your game, you're able to understand a limitation, find a way to improve it, and then take steps to improve it. And so those are, for my money, are all more important than someone who can drop a Michigan, mid-game, or dance through an opponent every once in a while. But that's kind of all pizzazz and not a lot of substance at times.
Right.
And we see a lot of that with some of these kids are like exceptionally talented, and you watch them in practice and you're like, good Lord. And then you put them in a game and they're not as effective. And because they can't put that all together with that kind of will to get in there and muck about and come out with the puck and
Right.
think 2 steps ahead. And so it's, I could sit here and talk about it all day, or maybe write a couple books about it, but it's an ever evolving process that kind of follows where the game is going. And at this point, speed and IQ are kind of the 2 pillars of the game.
Yeah, speed. As I'm listening to you, I'm like kind of thinking from my own experience and what I see, maybe more at a youth level and coming up. And then I'm also a bit of a deep thinker when it comes to like the whys of how this is happening. And um, the IQ piece to me has degenerated and hasn't evolved, in my opinion. Do you agree with that, first of all, or do you disagree?
I think it's, yeah, I in some ways I do agree with you. Is that because, like I just mentioned, is that like there's a lot of players that are just like hyper focused on individual skill, which is counterintuitive to being an intelligent player. Because
Right.
I would say 9 times out of 10, the best play is to move the puck. Right? You hear it from every minor hockey coach you've ever had. Is like, you can't skate faster than the puck. Right?
Yeah.
So if you can move the puck effectively and recognize time and space on ice, then you're going to be effective and you're going to be able to pick apart defensive schemes. And so in that sense, yes, I would agree that as there's parts of it, but then there's also, because there's just like some of these kids are coming up with so many ice sessions, like skills coaches, and they're getting looks at higher levels at such, they're coming up and they're so nuanced and they're so polished at such a young age, where I think that that is something that is fairly new in the last 10 to 15 years, and it continues to come through. So yeah, it's yes and no.
And that's sort of what I've seen. I think that there's been such an emphasis on individual skill development, and I mean physical skill development.
Yeah.
And also, I think that it correlates with the new YouTube, TikTok, Splash highlight generation, right? Like even at the NHL level, right? Like everyone loves the one where the guy skates to the neutral zone and beats the defenseman and then beats the goalie, and then it's a beautiful goal, right? Like he's probably skated the puck past 3 options, at that point, and isn't really the best hockey play. The funny thing is with McDavid, I will have a caveat there. When he does that, there's usually nobody open.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
and he
that
can do
is
what he
the
wants.
best, that is the best hockey play for him, right?
Yeah.
But I think kids are so conditioned to see that this is what they're supposed to do, that there's very few people that are actually looking for time, for space, for the opening, how to draw guys, how to draw 2 guys to give it to somebody else who doesn't have anything, right? And for me, when I'm evaluating, it's like I love when I see that, because it's like, boy, this is relatively rare. And if he does have a skill set package that goes on with that head, it's like, boy, I'll hitch my carriage to that pony any day of the week. So anyways, that's my evaluation. But you also talked about effort, and you also talked about these things like body language. Now these are things that I preach, right? I call it mindset. I mean, some people would call it character, but to me it falls under the umbrella of mindset and kind of the holistic athlete, which is super important to me. Now, I do watch for that, and it does mean something to me. Do you think, like, is there a divide when it comes to things like that, as far as body language, attitude, how they treat teammates? Like, how much is that overlooked? How much is it emphasized? Does it depend on the organization? Like, can you give me your summary of that?
Yeah. So, and this comes into where we talk about like film versus live viewings, where when you're in house and you can really key in on a player and you can watch him off, whereas if it's on camera and they move away from that player, you don't get to see how he reacted to a bad play or when he gets to the bench after missing an open net and stuff like that. So it's funny because there is almost like it's like a double-edged sword, where if the player is like someone like JT Miller, right, who's like considered like a really emotionally invested player. He's fiery, and he can sometimes push it a little too far, right? Yelling at his own teammates or like overreacting. And that's okay because he's a fiery, spirited player, and you want that in the playoffs, right? Versus if it's a really like skilled player who maybe isn't laying the body, isn't hard on the back check, isn't killing penalties, and he's breaking his stick over the goalpost because he missed an open net, or he's back on the bench and he's pissed off because he didn't get enough shifts. Now it's character, right? Now he's got poor character. Or one player could be a leader and he's showing why he's a leader, and the other one is selfish and not a team guy. Right. So it is true. They both can be true. They can. And usually you're going to know that from being around the player, being around the team, being around the organization, because you can tell when someone is a leader and he's doing it maybe to fire them up, right? Maybe it's a flat game and it's like, you know what, I'm going to break my stick over the boards here and it's going to wake you guys up, right? I'm already awake, I'm going, versus it being like pouting and doing it because something's not going your way. So it can definitely be true, but as you're, that's kind of once you're in the pros, right? When you're coming up, it's like you want to, especially if you're not pinged as an A-rated prospect, it's that you need to have everything going on your side. And so if that is leadership, you better make it clear that it's leadership, right? You're picking your spots very calculated, right? Which is difficult to do when it's an emotional thing. But yeah, so especially at an elite youth age, like I don't want to see, like, if you blow a play and like, you look up like this, it's like, that kills me, because I'm sure I did it a bunch too, right? But the thing to do is to put your head down and get going on the back check and make up for that mistake, right? And then check, like scouts notice that a lot more than they're going to be like, yeah, you missed an open net. I saw it. We all saw it, but it doesn't do you any good to look up and stare at the sky. Put your hands on your head, right? Or go back and kick the door closed or whatever, and you're all pissed off. So, yeah, character, that whole mindset, I think is really, really important, and something that I feel like kids are being at least coached at a younger age, the importance of it. Whether or not they can really harness it and grasp it at such a young age is so difficult to do. But you're just hoping to at least get those lessons in them early enough that they can find a way when they start to mature and get control of their emotions a little bit through their
Yeah.
teenage and 20s. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's an emotional maturation that happens. I mean, I think we at our age we recognize it in ourselves, even right that it happens. But a lot of the time with the work that I do, like there is a foundational element to like why that response is happening too, right? Like are they could be embarrassed because they missed the open net. They could be, they could be worried about what other people are thinking of them when they miss the open net. They could be really pissed off at themselves because they're a super, super competitive kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the way they respond. So it's like for me, like the psychology of that is super interesting. And and it's not a one size fits all, right? So, I mean, so I think that's the really interesting part about scouting is like, how do you attach that emotion to that personality and what does it mean, right? Because if he is super competitive, it might look the exact same as the guy who's really selfish and wanted that hat trick, right? Um, did you watch Mathis Preston play at all in his Bantam draft or at all at any point? No?
No, no, I don't get to see those kids with the young puck preps age ones. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
So, anyways, just for the, I was going to bring him up just because he was, I think he was third overall, and then he played at OHA. It's just, and he went to Spokane, which is my alma mater, right? So, like, I
Yeah.
did follow him a little bit, and I don't know him from Adam, but he's a hell of a hockey player, and he also is an emotional player, and watching him like that'd be an interesting one because I did hear that there was people that thought that maybe potentially selfish, maybe emotionally
Mm,
immature. Like what I saw was like a firecracker. I saw a kid that like really wanted to do amazing and was super competitive and just hadn't really got to the spot where he could smooth that out yet,
yeah.
and for me, I like that because I think in the game there needs to be a little bit more of it for the most part. And I like to see that competitive nature, and I'd rather celebrate it than try and extinguish it. So, how do you feel with that compete aspect, like in today's game? Again, I've seen a little bit more recently at that level, like a WHL camp that I went to, some discussions with people that have been to them. Geez, it's a different game when it comes to that in my mind. Like, is compete something that's celebrated in your evaluations?
In mine, it is absolutely. And you look at some of the most successful people, and not even in sport, but in life in general, and they are often highly confident, right? The self-belief is like through the roof and highly competitive. And like in hockey, like we don't just like, accept it, we encourage it, right? Like this is like, it's all these references to like it's like war, right? You're going into the corners and you're against your enemy and you got to come out with the puck no matter what. And it is like it's little one-on-one battles all over the ice, right from the face-off. And it's like you need to be hyper competitive. Every puck is yours, right? They have the puck, that's my puck, I want it back. And so we breed this into these players, but then yeah, we might, then we might shun them because they are too competitive, right? Like now they lost it, now they've lost their emotions. And it's, again, we're talking about kids for the most part here too, right?
Yeah.
Where they can't regulate. Like I'm a school teacher for 10 years. Like these kids can't regulate their emotions, in PE class, let alone like in a hyper competitive where they have aspirations, right? Whether it's the NHL or it's to play pro or to go to school, whatever it is, they
Yeah.
have goals that they want to achieve. And like, who's watching? I need to be my best. And if I'm not, like, God, right?
Yeah.
So no, I appreciate the work ethic. Absolutely. And then, which is something I've gotten a little bit more throughout this, is getting an opportunity to like sit down and like get to know these kids even a little bit. And they're so well trained for the most part, but I find that like I can have just like more like flowing conversations with them where it's not like, hey, we're sitting at the combine and you got your GMs there and you got your suit on and you're trying to give canned answers as best you can. Is that you try to get in to know the players, you talk to the coach about them, see what kind of player they are, right? Like, and are they in the gym? Are they doing extra stuff? Because basically, like, having a skills coach and shooting 100 pucks a day, that's bare minimum for elite junior hockey, like youth hockey these days, right? Like, how hard are you working? Are you already interested in your nutrition? Right? Are you making sure you're getting your enough protein a day? Are you hitting the weight room? Are you taking rest days when you need them? Are you being smart about it? And so that all goes into that work ethic package that sets them up to be successful on the ice too. So it's a full-time job right off the hop for some of these kids that actually have the will and the skill to potentially turn this into a career. Where I mean, I didn't play pro, but I'm not sure it was like that 30 years ago when you were coming
Yeah.
up.
No, it definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't. It was a new thing. I've done some thinking on that too. It's kind of crazy because like that. the they're much more polished. They're much more professional now. Like my son, and this is no word of a lie, and I played 10 years pro and at the highest level. He is more of a professional now with his approach to his day than I ever was.
Yeah.
Like, and he's 15 years old. Like, I
Yeah.
can't believe how committed he is to
Mm.
his skill set, like his growth, his development, his training, his social life. I mean, like, is not there at all, right? Like, I'm
Mm.
actually like, hey, man, like, go out. You know what I mean? Like, you're 15. No, like that's not his thing. Like
Yeah.
he's dialed, right? To a point that I think it's kind of fanatical. But I mean, that's the way he is. And who am I to
Yeah.
say, right? Like he has a dream and he's chasing it. I think that's fantastic.
It's commendable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's commendable and it's amazing. There's nothing bad about that at all. The funny part when I look back is like I do feel during our time, like, yeah, we drank more beer than we should have. And yeah, we did some of the things that we weren't supposed to do. But holy shit, did we compete?
Yeah.
And I think that there was a level of that, like, even the fact of, like, can you get home at 2:30 in the morning and then show up at 9 o'clock and go to work? You mean, can you do that without having an excuse? Can you get things done when things aren't going well? Like, I think, like, that whole resiliency, grit kind of persona was just a little bit more ingrained than I see in the guys coming up now, and I'm not really sure why or what the difference is there, but yes, to your point, 100% more polished, 100% more committed to their craft. But I do see a little bit sometimes with the higher level kids that they're pretty easy to get thrown off course sometimes when some adversity shows up.
Yeah, and I think, and this is obviously painting a generation with a broad brush, and that's not for everybody. But again, from my work in hockey, from my work as an educator, is that, there is some entitlement, I would say, in this kind of next crop of youth coming up, where they do expect everything to kind of the path to be nice and paved for them
Yeah.
too, right? And it's true, right? Like just even in regular life, could you go out partying that night and wake up at 6 a.m. and go to your job and do your job well, and then go do it again that next night? Like, do you have that in you where now I'll just call in sick, right? Take the easy road or whatever.
Right.
And you're right. I
Yeah.
do think that there is some more entitlement, some more looking for the easy way out. Everything should be, and not to say that life is easier for this generation. It's probably harder now with
Yeah.
the way technology and things that cost and job opportunities and everything is getting harder and harder. And it is same with sport, right? Like it's harder to be a pro athlete now than it was 30 years ago. And that was harder than it was 20 years before
Yeah.
that. And so it's just because they're so polished, because they're so skilled, because it's such a global event now where everyone has access to these high level coaches, is that it's a gauntlet. So
Yeah. It's a
kudos
gauntlet.
to your son though, to being so dedicated, because not everybody is, and there's loads of kids out there who have never been cut from a team, have never had anyone say no to them. They come from a wealthy background, their family, and everything's handed to them, it's all great, and now eventually they are going to hit that roadblock. And are they going to have that ability to withstand that adversity and push through it, or is that when the rails are going to come off and that kid who had to fight through the whole way is going to pass them?
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, you sound like a commercial for me, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like, and that is what I see more. And I just see, like, instead of, like, the leash on our kids has been way shorter. Like, even if, like, I consider myself a free range parent, I think, for the most part. You mean, for lack of a better way to describe it, like, I want my kids to go out and explore the world and test rules and see where they fit and have them scratch their knee and get up and figure it out, right? Be problem solvers. But even to the extent that I want to do that, you kind of can't now. You know what I mean? Just the way life is, the way society is, the way that things are. So for the majority of kids, like, it is like the path has been there, let alone bulldozer parents. It's like, pave the way, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
want any adversity, and they don't have the tools, is what I'm trying to get at. Like, it's not that it's inherently they can't do it, but they haven't been given the tools to be able to have the self-belief, to be able to have the confidence, to be able to have the resiliency, because they know they can handle it. So then when
Mhm.
something does come up, there is this lack of empowerment because they really don't know. They're
Yeah.
flounder a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's the one thing, like, a cautionary tale to the parents there who, I mean, if you have money, what, where your kid has been, whether he's ever been cut, whether it's been easy for him the whole way. Like, I promise you, it's not going to be easy the entire way. Like, it's
Nope.
not, it's impossible for
Yeah.
it to be easy the entire way. And that is when the defining moment comes in for a lot of these players, is then what next,
Yeah.
right? What
No.
next?
No, for sure. And personally, like I'm trying to bring my kids up with that, and it's not an easy thing, but like so I was asked to coach this rep team here locally, and I just said only if my kid makes it. Like, he's not on this team because you've asked me to coach. Right. And if he makes it on his own merit, and I told to him too, you're not getting on this team just because they want me to coach it. And if you don't make it, then I'll coach you on this team down here, right? The one you do make. And so that's just, you have to experience that. I remember being cut from teams, and it breaks your heart. But what do you do with it, right? Do you then give up? Or do you turn that into motivation? I'm going to go shoot another 100 pucks a day. I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to get it. I'm going to do my squats. I'm going to, work on it so that next year they can't cut me. I'm going to make it so they can't do it. Right. And so that's just going to build that character. That's going to fuel them throughout hockey and hopefully throughout whatever else they do in their life, because the vast majority of these kids aren't going to play pro. Right. Yeah. They're going to end up being the future generations in all sorts of economy of businesses and things like that. So,
yeah, no, I really appreciate you mentioning that. And yeah, I mean, and that is like the to put maybe a bow on it, and what you were talking there with the idea of, yes, these players, my son included, right? Like I work with athletes. My son is one of these athletes. They want to be an NHLer. Who doesn't, right? Their hands up in the air, and he's doing what he can to make it happen. But the realism of this whole thing is he is developing himself as a human being. He's established a goal. He's understand there's obstacles in the way. He understands it's a competitive environment. He understands that he needs to get better, that he wasn't maybe, gifted with God's touch, that, he is one of the elite from a young age. So he has to catch players. He understands the value of teammates and the relationships required for him to be good at anything, that it's not an individual event. And guess what? If it doesn't work out for him, he takes all that stuff with him wherever the hell he's going. So, like, I am
exactly.
so grateful for the game, just that my kids have found something that they love and they aspire to do, and they get all these amazing lessons. And I think with what I do as a mindset coach, like if we can round out the human, I say, behind the athlete, I mean, we've won 100%. Right? Because they have a better chance to get what they want. And if they don't get what they want, hey, hopefully we've created a better human who's an awesome community member, who's inspiring others and is doing good things. So
set up for success in another avenue, right?
Yeah,
Like, and
exactly.
that's the key. That's what we're trying to get for these kids. And then, now that I'm not teaching, I get to do that just purely coaching, which is really cool, because it's kind of all the fun of teaching, just in that I'm still trying to shape these young kids into being proper humans, right? Like that's the mindset. And that's what that's why my parents put me in sports, keep them out of trouble, keep them busy. Oh shoot, he really loves it. Now he wants to do it 7 days a week. All right, well, I guess that's what we're doing. But it teaches you lessons, right? And across all sport too.
So you talked about your growth as an evaluator and as a scout, and that you're different than you were 5 years ago, and I think that's amazing. I can continue to get better, of course, in what I'm doing as well. I was just thinking, like, in that realm. So, I mean, you're playing in a sandbox that has NHL Central Scouting, that has, these other entities that do their own rankings, let alone like the teams do their own rankings. How apt are you to like see or to look over your shoulder and wonder, hey, do I got this player wrong, or should I come back to the field a little bit? Like, how did that happen for you, and where are you at now with your own evolution with that?
Yeah, just like in sport, learning how to have self-confidence and belief in yourself, it is a process. And so, early on, I would take that, that popular consensus, or hey, like, this person I really respect thinks this, even though I don't. I'm like, he's probably right because he's done this longer and he knows more than I do. So I'll just change my opinion. And so I have this one example is 2017. I didn't really like Nolan Patrick's game. I think I would have liked him around like the 10 or 11 spot, but everyone and their dog had him 1 or 2. And so I'm like, obviously I'm wrong. If everybody sees it like this and I see it like this, then I'm wrong. And so I put him 3rd. I was like, I'll hedge a bit and I'll put him 3. And I put Haskin in it too. And I hated it. I regretted it. Like, even before Patrick's career kind of got derailed with injury, there is that I didn't like respect that I did that. And
Right.
so I kind of had a little chat with myself. I was like, don't do it. Like, this is how you see it. And then if you're wrong, you learn from that down the road and you make those adjustments. And so then 2020 came around, and it was a Lafreniere draft, or maybe it was 19. And I really liked Quentin Byfield, and I thought that Byfield was the best player in 5 or 6 years. It didn't matter who was the best player at 17. I'm looking at who's going to be the best player when they're in their peak and throughout their NHL career. And so I think I was the only person on earth who didn't have Lafreniere won that draft. And so I had Byfield, and I took heat for it. And I just kept saying, I was like, in 10 years, I'm either going to be the smartest guy in the room, or I'm going to look like an idiot, and I'll learn from it either way. And so the jury's still out, but we'll see. We'll check back in a few years and see how it worked out. But so I've changed that in my philosophy, and I even go like, with the scouts at EP, we don't all agree on things, right? We're constantly arguing and banging the table for a player, and why, asking those questions. Okay, you see this, I'm going to go back, I'm going to look for it. I still don't see it, I'm not buying it. And so, we come out with our own draft board, and we're going to drop a 2025 one here next month, or our first one of the year. We've already got like over 1,000 game reports on this class already, which is crazy. Wow. And we won't agree, but then at the end of the year, I'm one of the fortunate people that is allowed to drop his own personal ranking with elite prospects. So myself and Mitch Brown are the only ones that get to do that. And so you get to see, here's what we think as a group, and then here's what I think on my own. And then cool. we can find out who's right down the line, and then whoever else has got to buy me a beer.
I think there's a great lesson though, even in what you're saying, and maybe it's obvious, but maybe it isn't, is that like if you're a player out there, just somebody needs to like you, not everybody, and like your game is your game, and double down on what you're great at. That's the thing that I always tell the players I'm working at. Understand how you provide value, first of all, because there's going to be a unique skill set that you have that somebody needs and that somebody is going to value more than somebody else. And then obviously don't have a handicap or a weakness that is going to keep you out of the conversation, right? You can't be completely deficient in something. So like double down on what you're good at, and then let the things go. You know what I mean? Like you have to be able to let it go, because everyone's going to have a different opinion, and it just takes one, So I don't know, maybe you can speak to that for those out there listening.
No, you're absolutely right. And we talk about that, when I get asked about like, oh, where's this guy going to be drafted? Where's he going to be projected? And it's like, oh, we like him in this spot, but all it takes is one team, right? One team to see you at a certain event where they see you shine in an area that they value, right? And because it is like the across the board, 32 NHL teams, their lists are wildly different, right? Maybe at the top it's going to be very similar, but like throughout the way, like it's crazy, because they all value different things. They all see these players at different times, and so you never know who's watching. But you exactly right, is that you find, what can I bring to the table, and how can I best maximize that, right? So if you're a stay-at-home defenseman, who cares if you end up with 12 points in the season? Did you allow 7 when you were on the ice, right? Like, are you out there just, shutting down everybody? Because that's what matters. And so going to your EP page might not be so impressive, but the people who know what they're looking for see you, right? There's nowhere to hide anymore. If you're good and you're talented enough at a certain level, you will be found. And so, and that's just, and that's again, believing in yourself and having an understanding of what you can and cannot do, right? And that's another thing that I look for, is that like this player understands where they can succeed and they maximize it, right? They understand their limitations and they try to limit how it impacts their game. And so again, that comes into their IQ, which is like, or hockey awareness, or whatever you want to call it. It's such a blanket statement, but it encompasses so much in the game.
Just going to take a short break from episode 139 with Cam Robinson to give a shout out to our sponsors here for this episode, which is Elite Prospects, the gateway to hockey. Online since 1999, EliteProspects.com is the #1 statistical hockey resource. Serving over 1 million unique visitors weekly, it offers the most informative hockey player database on the web and has the most reliable transaction tracker available. For youth hockey players, EP is your very own online showcase to highlight your achievements and help secure future playing opportunities. Coaches, scouts, and schools at every level of the game consider Elite Prospects their one-stop shop to discover future stars. Hockey fan crazy about the NHL, the draft, and your team's top prospects? There's no better place than EP Rinkside, providing insight and analysis on players worldwide through written features, video breakdowns, interviews, and more. Head to EliteProspects.com now and experience your gateway to hockey. Now let's get back to episode 139 with Cam Robinson. I've said it here in the program before, but I mean, it's not that rare for a third-line guy at the WHL to be a good third-line guy at the AHL, to be a good third-line guy at the NHL level. And by what I mean by that is like never really played the power play, never been a more than a point a game player, right? We have this idea in our head that the best players are the players with the most points. Now, that's not always true when it comes to when we're actually figuring out how to provide value to a team, right? And I guess that is one of the things you are trying to evaluate too. I mean, is the point a game in the WHL going to correlate to what? You know, I mean, as a pro, or is the guy who has 30 points in 60 games, but gets all the pucks out along the half wall and knows how to get in the forecheck and cause disturbances and turnovers, is that guy more likely to actually be an NHL player? Maybe talk about how you view those two scenarios.
No, for sure. That's a really great question, and something that I've, AGM and a former player, and he said basically to me is like, what's he going to be? What's he going to be? What kind of player is this guy going to be in the NHL? And so you look at him, and so it might be this like really wizard like offensive player in junior, but what's he going to be at the NHL level? Is he good enough to play a top 6 job in the NHL? Is he going to get power play 1? Because if he's not, what's he bringing to the table versus, like you said, that player who learned how to be an energy line guy in junior, to kill penalties, to make the smart plays, to always get the puck out, to always get the puck in. And now you hone those skills throughout junior, and now you're doing it in pro hockey and you're building your way up. You look at that player and you'd be like, that guy could be a penalty killer. That guy could be a bottom 6 player in the NHL, even though he's far less dynamic than this guy over here who plays all the top minutes in junior, but won't as soon as he turns pro. So absolutely, right, is that know where you're going and maximize it, right? And if you are a skilled player and you recognize like, hey, I'm not as skilled as some of these other guys, like, you better add something to your game, right? You need to bring something unique. And so for players, I think it's the same question you need to ask yourselves. What am I going to be at the next level? And if you can't answer that, you better revisit what you're doing and try to add some more layers to your game, because you're like, hey, I don't think I'm going to get power play 1 time when I move out of junior here. I better add some penalty killing. I better ask my coach, like, hey, let me work on the face off. Like, let me be that guy in the D zone to win those draws for you and to get the puck out and to be killing penalties and be down. When we're down a goal, I'm out there trying to score, but I'm also down there when we're protecting a lead. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's that's so crazy too. I mean, I love you talking about that. I talk about building out your tool kit, right? And trying to be as diverse as you can, really. I mean, the more positions you can play, the better. It's also tough to put ceilings on kids though, too, isn't it? Right? To say like you can't be this. I mean, I think the vast majority of guys who are power play guys in the WHL and see themselves in the top 20 in the scoring leaders, there's never been any reason for them not to doubt that they could be a top guy in the NHL or AHL, right? They don't think that way.
No.
I'm not sure if they should either. It's kind of so crazy. Like when I'm working with that, right? It's like that confidence and that swagger. Somebody's got to be in the top 6. Maybe it should be you, right?
Yeah.
But I know you from an evaluation standpoint. Like that is what we're trying to accomplish. When it comes to that and it comes to exposure, and people are very worried about leagues, that they play in and where and how. Where do you put the hierarchy? You're from the West Coast here. Like, is it WHL the number 1 league to scout? 2 would be BCJHL, or like how do you do that as far as your routes are concerned?
Yeah, see, I'm like a glorified crossover scout. So I scout all over the world. So I'm fortunate enough, which isn't primarily how NHL teams work. They will have crossover guys, or like a team like Carolina will have their regions, but by the end of the year, they're all crossover scouts. They all have to get eyes on everybody at least a few times. So for me, it's cyclical, whether it's the Dub 1 year and the OHL the next year, or maybe it's the USHL is really coming up and is becoming a really nice feeder league. Kids are moving to school early, so the NCAA is producing all these draft eligible prospects now too. Kicking over to Europe, the J20 in Sweden, it's becoming, even on the bigger ice sheet, it's becoming, a little more honed in, a little more, it's got a little jam and a little grit to their game. So these kids are better prepared to step into the Allsvenskan or the SHL before crossing over, and they're better prepared. Finland was really coming up. And I see like dark times coming out of Finland right now, is that, they've got a few classes that are going to be really underdeveloped on skill. And so a country like Slovakia or Czechia is climbing up that ladder. So you're like I said, is that don't worry so much about where you're playing within reason. If you're playing at a high enough level, you will be found. And if you're succeeding, and so for a player that maybe they're playing in the OHL, it's like, their dream is to their local kid. They want to play for the London Knights, a powerhouse, right? Well, if you're going to get 14 minutes a night in London, or you can go down to wherever, Saginaw or something like that, or Brampton, and you're going to play 20, it's like, well, go play there, because it doesn't really matter, right? Maybe you'll get a longer playoff run with the Knights, but you're going to have better opportunities to grow as a player. Or conversely, right, if you're not quite able to move up to the WHL, go play in the BC, go light it up in junior A, and go take that college route, right? Or take an extra year. Don't try to make the league as a 16-year-old. Come out in your draft year, like Tarek Parasak did this year with Prince George. He was a rookie, scored 40 goals in the dub. He ended up being an early pick. So there's different routes for everybody. I mean, I go back to the one where Alex Edler, was a third rounder to Vancouver there. He was playing what, it's kind of insulting to the Swedish third tier, but, basically a glorified beer league. Like it's, but he was found. If you're good enough, they're going to get out there. They're going to watch you. They're going to see you, and they're going to be like, this kid's good. We're going to take a swing at him. And that was 20 years ago then too. So.
Right. Yeah. That's fun. Is there any stories? I mean, we're talking about like comparing rankings and stuff. Like the one that I mean, I guess everybody noticed, anyone who watched the draft, was that Bennett Seneca, who all of a sudden Anaheim takes what looked like a massive flyer and took him 3, where I didn't see anyone ranked him anywhere inside the top 10, to my knowledge. I thought that was like, what a brave move by Anaheim. In that scenario, maybe speak to that pick or any other things that you kind of surprised you from this draft when it comes to the 2024 NHL draft.
Yeah, Seneca, he was a fun one because, this is a kid who put on something like 4 inches in the year before getting selected there in Vegas. So he was a smaller player, like 5'10", and had to use his hands and his creativity to kind of go weave through the giants there. And then all of a sudden he starts shooting up. He's 6'2", he's 6'3". So he looks a little gangly out there, but he still has all those skills, and his developmental arc was just spiking as the season wore on. And so it was funny, we had him pretty high at EP. I'd have to look. I feel like we did have him top 10. I had him top 10 personally, but right before the draft, like days leading up to it, I'm out there working the phones and trying to find out like who's picking who, see if I can break this early. Yeah. And, trying to find out where Demidov's going to go. And, I kept just hearing like, watch out for Seneca. He's a climber. And so eventually, like I was on with Colby Armstrong on Chicklets there right before on the draft floor. And he said, give me your top 6 picks. And I rattled them off 6 in a row, and they ended up going right. And I was just like, each one, just like when I got Seneca and I called him at 3, like, whoa. And then it shows him and his face was shocked. Right. And he drops like, he couldn't even believe it. And there's a great picture of him and I standing on the draft floor in Vegas, and I'm talking to him. Like, I was like, you a little surprised there, Beckett? And he's like, oh, man, like, I was like, hey, you should have been following me on Twitter. I called this like an hour ago. He's like, you did? Like, yeah.
Wow, good for you. That's so funny. And this is not planned for everyone listening. I had no idea. So the fact that I bring up Seneca is hilarious. So you called it. Holy smokes.
I called Seneca at 3, yeah.
Because Seneca had no idea. You could tell like his response was so authentic and so awesome, right? Like, man, cool with them. What gave you the hint on Anaheim? Why do you think Anaheim was going to pull the trigger?
Well, I mean, and I didn't, and sometimes, I'm fortunate enough to have some people that'll be like, yeah, this is what's going to happen. And you get some of that kind of stuff. But this one is just like, I was just kind of fitting the pieces together that Anaheim, they marched to the beat of their own drum. And we saw that, right? They took Leo Carlson the year before when everybody thought it was going to be Fantilli. They took Mason McTavish there at 2 when everybody thought it was going to be somebody else. And like, I love that they are willing to do that. And I had heard that they had, gone out and watched him a lot down the stretch. And that they were interested in that type of player. And I just kind of like, it wasn't a for sure when I called it, but I was like, I like the chances of this. We knew Caden Lindstrom to CBJ was like nearly a lock. That was kind of the worst kept secret in hockey at that point. And that meant that Demidov was going to fall all the way to Montreal, and whether they were going to take him or not, that was kind of a question too, after passing on Mishkov the year before. And so just kind of fitting all the puzzle pieces in, it made sense. And then Utah with TJ Ginla there, I was just lucky to kind of throw a dart and be like, watch out for Teach here, and landed at 6. So I was harassing Jerome to see if he's like, I don't know who's going to pick him. He couldn't give me anything either, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So put on your GM hat now. I've always thought this was interesting. The one I thought was really interesting was when Seider went. That was a few years ago, where I mean, a lot of guys didn't have him till like late in the first round, like 20 something. And Yzerman stepped up and took him 6 or whatever it was there. And when that happened, I was like, okay, like, and it turned out to be a great pick. Obviously, Moritz is fantastic. And he probably would maybe go higher in a redraft, right? Even than that now.
Yeah.
But at the time, like, why wouldn't like a spot? Every spot is worth something, right? Like, why wouldn't have Yzerman gone to 10 or gone to 12 and maybe got another first rounder? Like, are they? I guess you don't know what everyone else is going to do, but okay, you're the GM, like, and you are Anaheim GM. Bennett is your guy. Seneca, you're at 3. You don't think anyone's going to be taking them till I don't know when. Do you trade down?
I absolutely do if I can do it. Now the trouble is that teams will rarely trade into the top 10, right? Or move up that far because the cost is so prohibitive. Is that, if you said, like, if you're Pat Verbeek and you're like, I'm going to move from 3 to 5, right? Just slide back a couple spots. So Montreal, they're probably interested. They want Demidov, and they're like, you can maybe, like, fake it a little bit and be like, we're going to take Demidov unless you don't jump up into this spot. What do they have to give you, right? Like, because to move up those 2 spots, that might cost you next year's first, right? It's very expensive to move around like that. But I'm a huge proponent of GM sliding back, and Carolina they're the masters of it. They did it this year. They liked a player when they were picking at whatever they were picking, 27 this year, but they're like, we like them, but we like this other player too. Let's see if we can slide back to 33 or 34 and still get the guy we like. And they did. And so now they got themselves a free second round pick. They got the guy they liked anyways, and they pick up another second rounder in the process. And they just do that all day. It slows down the draft. It kills everybody. I'm always joking with their scouts. I'm like, you guys make this a 5-hour event on day 2 because they're just always sliding back, and they get incredible value. And it's kind of like being a big league hitter, where even the best in the world, you're getting a hit like 35% of the time, right? And so that's the way it is with scouting too. So it's darts. How many darts can you throw? And some of them are bound to hit. And now when you're at the top of the draft, it's like you fall in love with the player and you don't want to risk losing him. And so for a player like Moritz Seider, a big, powerful right shot defenseman, I'm sure Yzerman probably kicked the tires on sliding back a little bit, but whether he wasn't going to get value, because if you move back and then you lose on that player, now you need to consider that trade as, okay, we basically traded Seider for this new player plus this pick. And is that worth it to us? Or do we actually believe he's going to be our number 1 D for the next 15 years? Okay, we're just going to take him at 6. So it's easy to say when I'm not on the hot seat and I'm not a GM making those calls, but in general, I'm a big proponent of sliding back and getting more assets, because the more darts, the better.
Right.
Yeah. That's a scout's mind probably too.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
the scouts are like, yeah, give us more picks to make, right?
Yeah, when I think that's the business side of it too. I think I'd be in that boat too. Most likely, I think I'd be trying to maximize as much as I could. You know what I mean, and play the risk associated potentially with what would be happening on the downside there. Was Macklin Celebrini just automatic no brainer? Like, was he's that good?
Yeah, no brainer. He's we made the joke where it's like, if Sidney Crosby and Jonathan Taves like had a hockey baby, it's Macklin Celebrini. Like, he is exceptional. Coming into the year, there was maybe someone, because you never know what can happen over the course of a draft eligible season, if someone can take huge strides and really catch up, but he just separated himself. Even as a draft -1, it was such a massive separation, and then he just continued to make that gap further now. Whereas this year, this is James Hagen's draft year, and I do think he's going to go 1, but it is far from a slam dunk here in September, that there will be players that will compete with him, and number 2 is wide open right now. So there's gonna be a whole swath of players that are going to fight for that spot, and I wouldn't be surprised if 1 or 2 really take a run at Hagens and make teams think about it anyways.
Right. And with him, like, I didn't watch Celebrini at all at the NCAA level. I mean, his points speak for themselves. I didn't see one shift, so I can't speak to that. But I did watch him at the World Junior. Um, what was like? Not like, it wasn't Bedard like, that's for sure.
No.
Like, where do you like, what does the World Junior mean to you in that environment, I guess, in of itself? Because it is just a snapshot of a kid at a certain point in time, right? And maybe can just mean that. But he wasn't like, I wasn't as excited for him. I'm not as excited to see him in the NHL as I was for Bedard, mostly because of what the hell was happening there his junior year, and also what he did there at the World Juniors. So yeah, talk to me about his Celebrini performance there.
Yeah, so I was fortunate. I was in Sweden for the World Juniors last year, and he was very, very good still. The Canadian team just wasn't as good as it was the year with Bedard, where he had, I think that was Stankoven's year, it might have been the year before that, but he had assets. So like Dylan Gunther, like, he had all these young, like, or older players to him, these 19-year-olds that were dynamic. And that iteration of Canada wasn't as strong, and consequently they got bounced early, right? But he only played 4 games. I was still really tempted to put him on my all-star ballot,
Oh,
that
really?
yeah, because he was that good in his game as like a super young 17-year-old. Like his birthday's July, I think. Um, he's just turned 18 now. Like he was the player on that Canadian team. He was strong, he was smart, he was positionally really sound, defensively really strong, and he did have some wow moments, but let's not get it twisted. He is not Connor Bedard offensively. Now, at the end of the day, when you're looking at them and they're 25 and 24 years old or 28 and 27 or whatever, there's a world where Celebrini could be almost as important, almost as impactful with his all-around game. Just like there was a time where, people said, is Jonathan Toews like as good as Sidney Crosby? Right. He never had anywhere near the offensive skill that Crosby had, but because he was so impressive defensively to go along with plus rated offense,
Yeah.
it put him into that new world. And I think Celebrini is a more dynamic offensive player than a kid like Toews. So it's like, he put up like 70 plus points in the NCAA at 17, like Hobie Baker at 17, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so even though he had the down World Juniors, quote unquote, where he didn't pop and break records,
Yeah.
I do think he's going to be an extremely talented player. But, am I going to call for 30 goals and 65, 70 points this year like I was looking for from Bedard last year? No, I'm not. So
Right.
it's going to be a slower burn, I think, as he comes
Yeah.
up this way.
Well, I was trying to say that, tell my kids that. I don't know if you know, I played in the World Junior in '96, right? As a 19-year-old, I was an early birthday too, February, so I was almost 20, right? And it's a 19-year-old tournament. For the most part. For these guys that do play in that at 17 against the best 19-year-olds in the world, right? Like 2-year difference, and for them to do that well, like what Bedard did that year was absolutely like mind blowing to me. And I'm not even really like I wouldn't call myself a Bedard fan. Like I like him, you know what I mean? But it's not like I'm a fanboy of him or whatever. But like that whole thing was like crazy to me that he could do that in that competition. It was like, how could you not deny him, right? It was like, well, this is just crazy. So he has to be that good, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, he has. Like we didn't see McDavid do that at the same, we didn't see
Right.
Crosby. Like they didn't nobody like basically since Gretzky or like has
Yeah.
as a 17 as a draft eligible to really just go bananas like that. It is unheard of.
It
So
was-
I'm not were you part of the five in a row, the Golds?
yeah, we were the fourth. Yeah.
You're the four. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. I was wondering if that was 4 or 5. Yeah, that must have been a heck of a time.
Yeah, it was fun. It was our year, which was really cool. Actually, it was the first year that it went to the current format, like with the semifinal, final.
Yeah,
Or actually, I don't think there was a quarterfinal. I think there was a bye at the time
you
though.
got
So
the
we played the
bye. Yeah,
semis against Russia, and then we had Sweden in the final. So that was fun because there was actually like a gold medal game, and previously
yeah,
there wasn't, right? So we had the first gold medal game, which was super cool. And
man, what an
obviously some
experience.
great memories from that. Again, Les lives down this road from me, and I see him here from time to time. And he was the top forward in that tournament, and Jose Theodore was there. Anyways, whatever, a bunch of
Yeah,
good players, right? It was
awesome.
definitely a career highlight. Uh, when it comes to this year's draft, you mentioned the name. Where's that guy even from? I'm not that familiar with this year's draft class yet. Higgins.
Yeah, James Hagens, he's an American kid, so
Oh, he is.
he's played with the program there, U.S. national team. The
Yeah.
last 2 years, he played with the under 18s, and so I was in Finland for the World under 18s there last spring, and like, good lord, he was incredible. So he broke the records for points in single tournament scoring, dynamic throughout the entire event. And it was basically him and McKenna. So Gavin McKenna for the Canadians, who is still a draft -1 now, so he's a D-2 then.
Yeah.
And they were going head to head, and then in the gold medal game, maybe the best game I've ever been to live. Canada was down 3. His kid Trevor Connolly took a bad penalty, got a major, and Canada scored, and then scored again, and then ended up taking the lead, and they won it. And McKenna was dynamic and got, I think, 4 or 5 points. And so he didn't end up passing Hagens for the points, but they were going head to head. But I got a chance to like spend a little bit of times with Hagens too, and really polished speaker, intelligent. You can tell players gravitate to him, and then like highly, highly skilled. So now he's off to Boston College. And
Right.
so everybody thought Will Smith was going to stick around for another year, even though he led the nation in scoring last year. So he's coming out, going to San Jose, and Hagens gets to slide right into a spot. So he's going to get to play with Perreault and Ryan Leonard there, two, highly skilled first rounders. And so he's going to be put in a position to succeed. And so
Right.
that's why I think that it's, at the end of the day, it will be his spot to lose that top spot, because that Boston College team is going to run for a national championship, and he's going to get all the fun minutes, and he's probably going to put up monster point totals too. And it's like, how is a player like, Matt Schaefer, who's an exceptional defenseman, smooth skating. How's he going to compete against that, right? Like he's going to have to put up 100 points on the back end to try to like
Yeah.
rival that kind of production. So it will be difficult to unseat Higgins, but really he's a very impressive player. But again, he's not Bedard and he's not Celebrini too. So we're getting into that kind of next level of first overall picks where, Nico Hischier and those type of players where they're going to be quite good, but maybe not like superstar.
Who's the top Canadian or the top couple Canadian?
Well, probably Schaefer. He's my favorite. So defenseman there playing in the O, and I just saw him at the Holinka, and he was incredible. Like, so he was a rookie last year, obviously in the OHL, and the skating is like supreme. Like it is very, very elusive skater, and loves to jump in the rush. And again, so it was Gavin McKenna and him were. McKenna was basically like he was looking for Schaefer every time he was on the ice, even though he was a defenseman. So because they were the best players, and so they're working off of each other. And so he's a really talented player. Roger McQueen, he's like a 6'5" power right. I believe he's a right shot center, playing in the West. Yeah, Brandon, that's right. And then Porter Martone, really good kid. He was the captain of that U18 team for Canada. 6'3", power winger, has some electric to his hands as well. But like, I think he's going to develop into more of like a two-way with some offensive, like some high-end offensive upside too. And another just like great kid, hilarious kid. It was funny after they won the U18s, the game ends. We're at the rink until midnight or whatever, and then got to be at the airport at 4 a.m. to catch our flight home from Finland. And so there I am, and TJ Ginla was on that team, and so Jerome was over working with Calgary and watching his son, and so I'd been hanging out with them a little bit, and I run into Jerome, and we're laughing and talking, and no one slept yet, and we get there, and so I'm hanging out with all these Canadian kids, and Martone's giving me the championship trophy, so I got a picture of me in the airport holding the U18 trophy, and then we're all on the flight back together, and I'm sitting next to him, and a really good kid too. So those guys are probably going to be looking at most of the top 5 this year, barring some kids really surprising and jumping out.
Oh, that's cool. That's great. Maybe last question. So just for, I don't know, I think players would be interested, maybe parents too. You show up at a game. Let's say, I don't know, what would be a good league? It doesn't matter. BCHL, WHL, whatever. Do you just circle the 17-year-olds or like, how do you do your reports? Because there's a lot of players on the ice. I guess not everyone's draft eligible, of course. So that's going to narrow it down from what you're looking at. There's going to be 16-year-olds there. There's also going to be 18-year-olds there that maybe weren't drafted the previous year. How does that look like for you? And how do you key in on who you're going to be writing about?
Yeah. So teams will do it differently. So some teams expect a report on everybody, whether it's a sentence, like even if it's a kid who's been drafted, because that then goes into the pro scouting side of things. And, maybe we'll look back on that in 5 years if we want to trade for him or sign him or whatever. But for me personally, I key in. I usually go to a game with like a few players in mind that I really want to watch. And then they're all going to be draft eligibles because I have my hands full with just the current draft class, but you can't help, you're watching the game, right? Yeah. So if someone's doing something really well or something not so well, then you're going to be making notes on them too, especially if it's a young kid, like a D-2 or a D-1 coming up. Probably I'll put a little more emphasis on getting some reports on them because we know it's going to be a build up to the draft versus like a kid who was drafted in the second round already. I'm probably not going to take any notes on him, but like a kid who was passed over and has himself a strong game, he'll be getting a report too, right? Because these kids, we're seeing it more and more. A late bloomer, they're even sneaking into like the top 50, top 60 in the NHL draft if they can pop and have a really strong season, or they're a middle rounder, right? Like an Anthony Romani went in the 5th this year after putting up like 110 in the O after being passed over. It's like you can really pop and you can get, and we need to have reports on those kids too. So right.
That's cool.
I'm looking for kids to do something and show something.
The episode that just got released yesterday was Josh Doan. So there's a perfect example. He didn't get drafted and turns out to be a second rounder the next year. Like it's rare, but it's becoming more common, I think, too.
For sure. I think Tanner Pearson he was a first when he snuck in too, right after being a draft passed That's over. Crazy. So you can do it, right? Like again, like you can't hide. If you're good enough, they're gonna find you and they're gonna like you. So
that's awesome. Well, thanks. Elite Prospects is definitely a growing brand within the sport. It's becoming part of, the fabric really of the sport. And I think that's sort of what the vision seems to be like for you guys, is to get in at the youth level, allow it to be the gateway, as you are calling it, to hockey. And so have these young athletes get immersed in it, fall in love with the stat line and the tracking, and, you can get in an EP a hole, right? Wormhole
Oh
pretty
yeah.
easy, right?
Yeah.
I know I've done it myself too, just
Yeah.
following my own career and different people's paths and where they go and who you played with. So it's a lot of fun. And then, I really like the involvement in the grassroots stuff, like the UMH 68. Thank you guys again for wanting to be involved in that, and also your own development stuff. And it's cool. I appreciate you sharing that with me and all the insight for the evaluations, and my audience appreciates that as well. So, Cam, thanks so much for joining us. Any last words of wisdom you wanna give to some of the athletes out there?
Yeah, man, get your head down, back check, right? Just just always be working. Just
It
work hard and
matters.
we'll find you. Yeah.
Yeah, it matters. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, best of luck with the season this year. I know you're going to have a lot of fun chasing kids around and getting your reports in, and I know you love what you do. So good luck with that. Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for being here till the end, and thank you, Cam, for being a part of it. And thank you, Elite Prospects, for being a valued partner with Up My Hockey and the UMH 68. So get over there to UMH. No, well, you can check that out too if you want to. UMH 68 on the Up My Hockey website. Or what I meant to say was go to eliteprospects.com. See your profile there. Verify it if you can. Get a premium account if you can. And take advantage of everything that Elite Prospects has to offer. I know that I have been lost on Elite Prospects more than once by jumping from team to team. When you're a suitcase like me, you can get lost in a rabbit hole real quick by looking at old teammates, where they played, who they played with, what kind of careers they have, what was their best season, who was that with, what was their coach at that time. Oh my goodness, if you are a bit of a hockey geek like I am, you can totally have a great time on Elite Prospects. And it's also fun to see the current players as well. Obviously, the young players, where have they played? What type of resume do they have as they came up through the ranks? And maybe they're draft eligible this year. And where did they play? And who did they play for? And what kind of stats did they put up? So lots of fun there. Elite Prospects is a great hockey resource, and again, a valued partner of Up My Hockey. So until next time, you play hard and keep your head up.